I showed up for my first solo overnight at 11:45 on a Monday and went straight to the carrier meter. Couldn't help it. The needle sat at about 98%, which Courtney said was fine. Totally normal, but it kept drifting. Just a little. Down to 97.8, back up to 98.2. The movement was smooth, but it never settled, and I stood there next to the console watching it wobble for probably 5 minutes before I even put my bag down. The station sat about 20 minutes west of Fort Collins, off a county road that didn't have a name I could remember, just a number. The building was low and tan and looked like every other government box from the 70s except for the antennas. 3 of them, huge, thin towers that went up maybe 200 feet. You could see them from the highway if you knew where to look. I didn't know anything about this place before I applied. I just needed something that paid and didn't ask a lot of questions while I tried to get actual audio gigs in Denver. Turns out, NIST WWV is a time station. They broadcast the official U.S. time signal on a bunch of shortwave frequencies, 24/7, and it's been running since like 1945 or something. Atomic clocks, backup oscillators, the whole thing. The signal goes out as this endless monotone hum with a tick every second and a voice announcement every minute. I heard it during my interview. Courtney played it through the monitor speakers, and it sounded clean, but kind of eerie. Just this tone, and then a tick. Tone, tick, tone, tick. Then a woman's voice saying the time in this flat, recorded way. At the tone, the time will be 14 hours, 32 minutes, coordinated universal time. The job was to sit in the control room during the graveyard shift and make sure nothing drifted out of spec. Check levels, log readings, listen for anything off. If something broke, I had a manual. If the manual didn't cover it, I had a phone number. That was it. I finally dropped my backpack on the floor next to the desk and pulled out the laminated card Courtney gave me on my last training day. She'd handed it over without ceremony, just set it on the console and said I should keep it close. It was the size of an index card, printed on both sides, and the edges were starting to peel from the lamination. The front said, "Station rules" in all caps at the top, then a numbered list. 1. Do not adjust the primary oscillator. 2. Monitor carrier deviation every 30 minutes. 3. Log all readings in the bound notebook, not loose paper. 4. If you hear interference on the monitor speaker, check grounding first. 5. If the red phone rings, answer on the second ring, not the first, not the third. The back had more, smaller stuff. Don't prop doors. Don't use personal devices near the console. Don't leave the building during a shift unless there's an actual fire. I'd read it maybe 20 times during training, and it still felt a little like a prank. The rules were too specific, too careful. But Courtney wasn't the kind of person who pranked anybody. She trained me for a week, 5 overnight shifts, where she sat next to me and walked through every piece of the room. Courtney was maybe mid-40s, hair in this neat bob that didn't move, and she had this way of talking where every sentence sounded like a procedure. She didn't do small talk. On my first night, she showed me the console, which was this long desk with a bunch of analog meters, a few digital readouts, and a mixing board that controlled the modulation. The monitor speakers were mounted on the wall above it, playing the live signal on low volume all the time. Tone, tick, tone, tick. Next to the console was a tall gray cabinet, locked. Courtney opened it with a key from her jacket and showed me the backup oscillator inside. This rack-mounted unit with a green LED that blinked every few seconds. She said if the primary ever failed, this one would kick in automatically, but I should still check the indicator light every hour. She didn't say what happened if the backup failed too. I didn't ask. There were keypads on 2 of the doors, the one to the transmitter hall and the one to the archive room. She gave me the codes, but made me write them on the inside cover of the log notebook instead of in my phone. She watched while I did it. The transmitter hall was loud, just racks of equipment and cooling fans, and we only went in there once. The archive room was at the back of the building, down a hallway with fluorescent lights that buzzed. Courtney unlocked it and showed me rows of metal shelves with binders and old logs going back decades. She said I probably wouldn't need anything in there, but I should know where it was. The binder on the end of the second shelf was labeled Incidents in faded marker. She didn't open it. The whole place hummed, even in the control room, even with the door to the transmitter hall shut. There was this low vibration in the floor and walls. It wasn't loud. You could forget about it for a while. But then you'd notice it again and realize it had been there the whole time, under everything. Courtney was good at the job, efficient. She never hesitated, but she also never really explained why things mattered, just that they did. On the fourth night, I asked her why the logs had to be in the bound notebook, and she said, because loose paper can be lost. Which, sure. But the way she said it made it sound like more than that. The red phone was the only thing she seemed uncomfortable with. It was mounted on the wall above the desk, next to the monitor speakers. Old rotary style, bright red, with no dial. Just a handset and a ringer. The first time I noticed it, I figured it was some kind of emergency line, like a direct connection to NIST headquarters or maybe the local fire department. Courtney didn't bring it up until the fifth night, and when she did, she kept it short. If it rings, she said, answer on the second ring. I looked up at it. What is it? A line. To who? She paused, then said, you'll know if it rings. Has it rung for you? Twice. What did they want? Confirmation, she said. She didn't elaborate. I waited, but she just moved on to showing me how to fill out the deviation log. I tried once more later, asked her what kind of confirmation, and she said, you answer the questions they ask. You don't expand. You don't guess. That was it. On my last training shift Saturday night into Sunday morning, the phone didn't ring. Nothing weird happened at all. Courtney walked me through a full cycle, checked my logs, and then at 6:58 she put on her jacket and told me I was ready. She didn't say good luck or call if you need anything. She just left. So, Monday night I was alone. I settled in, made a thermos of coffee before I left my apartment and brought the whole thing with me, plus a bag of pretzels and my phone even though I wasn't supposed to use it near the console. I kept it in my backpack. The control room was small, maybe 12 by 15 feet, with the console taking up most of one wall and a wooden chair on wheels that squeaked when you leaned back. There was a space heater in the corner that Courtney never turned on. I didn't either. The hum from the building kept it warm enough. I checked the carrier meter at midnight. 98.1 logged it. Listened to the signal for a while, just the tone and the ticks, and every 10 minutes the voice cutting in. At the tone, the time will be 0 hours, 10 minutes, coordinated universal time. It was a different voice than the daytime one, I think. Lower, still flat. I walked down to the transmitter hall and checked the backup oscillator. Green light, blinking. Came back and poured coffee. Checked the grounding on the monitor speakers, even though there was no reason to. It was fine. At 12:34, I logged the carrier again, 97.9, still in range. The night went quiet. I mean actually quiet under the hum. No cars on the county road. No wind. Just the tone and the tick and the sound of my pen on the notebook paper every time I wrote something down. I checked levels. I filled out logs. I listened. At 1:17 on Tuesday morning, the monitor speaker clicked. Just once, and then the ticks doubled. It only lasted a second, maybe less. One tick, then another right on top of it, like an echo that came too late. Then back to normal. Tone. Tick. Tone. Tick. I sat forward in the chair and it squeaked. Stared at the speaker. Checked the carrier meter. 98 exactly. No drift. I looked at the oscillator cabinet, but the door was closed and I didn't want to open it yet. Ran through Courtney's list in my head. Interference. Check grounding first. But the grounding was fine. I'd just checked it an hour ago. And anyway, That didn't sound like interference. It sounded like the signal itself had stuttered. I leaned in closer to the speaker, listening. The red phone lit up, a little bulb inside the casing, barely visible until it wasn't. Then it rang. I let it ring twice. That part was easy. I'd practiced it in my head during training, counted it out while Courtney watched me stare at the phone. 1 ring. 2 rings. Pick up. My hand was already on the handset by the second one. I lifted it and pressed it to my ear and didn't say anything. That was the other part Courtney drilled into me. Don't speak first. Don't confirm anything. Just listen. The line was open. I could hear that much. Not dead air, but the kind of faint static you get on old landlines, the hum of a connection that's live but distant. I waited. My chest felt tight, and I realized I was holding my breath a little, which was stupid, but I kept quiet. Then the voice came through. "Good evening." It was a man, older, maybe 50s or 60s, calm, polite even. The kind of voice you'd hear from someone calling about your car's extended warranty, except it didn't have that fake friendly edge. It was just controlled, steady. I didn't answer. Courtney said don't speak first, so I didn't. He continued without waiting long. "I'm calling to inquire about the minute that was stolen." That threw me. Not the tone, not the politeness, the actual words. The minute that was stolen. What the hell did that mean? I opened my mouth before I could stop myself. Rule 2 was don't expand, don't guess, don't add information they didn't ask for. But he wasn't asking a question. He was making a statement, a completely wrong one. "Nothing's been stolen," I said. My voice came out lower than I meant it to, but steady enough. "The system's fine." The moment I finished the sentence, I knew I'd screwed up. There was a pause. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds, but it felt like the kind of pause where someone on the other end is deciding something about you. Then the line went cold. Not a click, not a dial tone, just nothing. The static cut off, and the connection died, and I was holding a handset that felt heavier than it should have. I pulled it away from my ear and stared at it for a second, then hung it back on the cradle. My hand was shaking a little. I put it on the desk. That was when the meters dipped. All of them. At the same time, the carrier gauge dropped from 98% to maybe 85% in the span of a breath. The voltage readout sagged. The modulation needle swung left and bounced once before settling too low. It wasn't a flicker. It was a full drop, like someone had yanked power from the whole system and then let it struggle back up. The alarm started immediately. It was a sharp, repetitive beep from a little red box mounted under the desk, right next to the carrier meter. Loud enough to cut through the room's hum, but not quite loud enough to drown out the signal from the monitor speakers. I flinched and reached for the mute button on instinct, but I didn't press it yet. The room's hum changed. That's the best way I can describe it. The building had been vibrating this low, constant thrum since I got here, the kind of sound you stop noticing after a while because it's always there. But now it strained. It felt like the air was pulling inward, like the whole structure had inhaled and couldn't let it back out. My ears popped. I pressed the mute button and the alarm cut off, but the hum kept going, tight and wrong. The meters were still low. Carrier was hovering around 86% now, twitching but not climbing. I looked at the tall gray cabinet in the corner, the backup oscillator. Courtney's voice played back in my head. "If the primary fails, the backup kicks in automatically. You'll see the green light go solid instead of blinking. If that doesn't happen, you flip the manual override. Right side of the cabinet. Red switch." I got up. The chair squeaked. My legs felt stiff. I crossed the room and maybe 4 steps and opened the cabinet door. The backup oscillator was right there, rack-mounted and humming its own separate hum. The green LED was still blinking. 1 blink every few seconds, same as always. It hadn't switched over. The primary was still running. It was just running badly. I found the red switch on the right side of the unit, flipped it up, and the green light went solid. The carrier meter jumped. I turned and watched it climb back up. 88%, 91, 95. It settled at 97.4 and held there, drifting just a little the way it had been doing all night. The hum in the room eased. Not all the way back to normal, but close enough that I could breathe again without feeling like the air was too thick. I walked back to the desk and sat down. That was when I heard it. The ticks were out of sync. There were 2 monitor speakers. One mounted on the left side of the wall above the desk, one on the right. Both of them played the same signal. They were supposed to be identical. Courtney never said that outright, but I'd been listening to them for a week and they'd always been perfectly matched. Now they weren't. The left speaker was playing the tick right on time. 1 second, 1 tick, clean and steady. The right speaker was maybe a 1/10 of a second behind. Not much, just enough that I could hear the overlap, this tiny doubled beat that made my teeth hurt. Tick, 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 tick. I stared at the speakers and tried to figure out which one was wrong, but I couldn't tell. Maybe both of them. Maybe neither. The signal was coming from the same source. It shouldn't be possible for them to drift apart. I looked at the wall clock. It was stuck on 1:17. The second hand wasn't moving. It sat right between the 3 and the 4. Frozen. I checked my wristwatch. It read 1:19, then 1:17, then 1:20. I watched the numbers flicker on the digital display, jumping forward and snapping back, and my stomach dropped. The watch wasn't broken. I'd had it for 3 years, and it had never done this. It was just trying to figure out what time it was, and the room couldn't give it a straight answer. I pulled my hand back and shoved it under the desk out of sight. I didn't want to watch it anymore. The ticks kept going. Tick, 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 tick. My brain was trying to catch up. The phone call, the man asking about a stolen minute, the meters dropping, the oscillator switch, the time jumping around. I needed to tell Courtney. I pulled my phone out of my backpack, opened my email, and started typing. Courtney. Red phone rang at 1:17. Caller asked about. I stopped. My fingers hovered over the screen. Courtney's voice again. Answer only the questions asked. Don't expand. Don't guess. That counts even if you think you're just clarifying. I stared at the draft. That counts. She didn't say it counted if you spoke. She said it counted. Period. I didn't know if typing counted, but I didn't know that it didn't. I closed the email and shoved my phone back in my bag. The log notebook was sitting on the desk next to the carrier meter. Plain black cover, bound spine, numbered pages. Courtney had handed it to me on the first night of training and told me it was the only record that mattered. Everything else could fail. The log stayed. I opened it to the current page and picked up the pen. My last entry was from 12:34. Carrier at 97.9%. Normal. I clicked the pen and wrote the time, so 1:17. Then I paused. I didn't know what to write. The doubled tick. That was the thing I'd noticed first before the phone rang. That was the thing that mattered. I wrote it down. Extra tick observed following minute tone. Duration approx 1 sec. Signal returned to normal. My handwriting looked shaky. I pressed harder with the pen and finished the line. Carrier dip to 86%. Backup oscillator engaged manually. Restored to 97.4%. I stopped there. I didn't write about the phone call. I didn't write about the man's voice or the question or the way the line went dead. I didn't write about my watch or the wall clock or the hum in the room pulling tight. I wrote what I observed. That was it. I set the pen down and closed the notebook. The ticks were still doubled. Tick, 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 tick. I kept my hands on the desk and stared at the carrier meter and tried not to look at the clock. At 1:40, I pulled up the exterior camera feed. I hadn't checked it since the start of shift. Courtney showed me the button on day 2. Small toggle under the main console, left side, labeled XT in faded Sharpie. The monitor above the desk switches from a blank blue screen to 4 quadrants: north lot, south fence, east approach, west antenna field. All black and white, all grainy. Motion-activated floods were supposed to light them up, but half the time they didn't trigger. The west feed showed Richard Murphy walking toward the antenna field. I leaned forward. Chair squeaked. He was maybe 30 yards out from the building, moving slow across the gravel access road that loops the perimeter. No flashlight. That was the first thing I noticed. Richard always had a mag light clipped to his belt when he did rounds, always clicked it on near the towers because the floods out there were worse than the ones by the building. But his hands were empty. Just walking. He didn't look up at the camera. That bugged me. Richard always gave a little 2-finger wave when he passed the West Mount, knew exactly where it was, had been doing this contract for something like 3 years. Courtney mentioned it once, said he was reliable, showed up on time, didn't ask questions, logged his perimeter checks and left. But he didn't wave, didn't even glance up. His head was angled, not down at the ground, not straight ahead. Sort of tilted to the right like he was trying to hear something just out of range. I watched him take another few steps and the angle didn't change. He was tracking something. A sound, maybe. Something over the gravel or past the guy wires. The picture quality was bad, but I could see his mouth was closed. His jacket hung loose, unzipped. He was wearing the same dark zip-up he'd had on earlier when I'd seen him pull in around 11:30. He stopped. Right between 2 guy wires, the ones anchoring the south tower, I think. Hard to tell from the camera angle, but the wires made a narrow V and he was standing in the middle of it, feet apart, still not looking at the camera. Then he crouched down and set something on the ground. The motion was careful, deliberate. He lowered it with both hands, placed it on the gravel, then straightened and stepped back. The camera glitched. Just a flicker, half a second of static, and when it cleared, Richard was crouching again. Same position, setting the object down again with both hands. Same careful motion, same spot. I blinked. The object stayed on the ground. Both times. Like the camera had replayed the moment, but the first version hadn't erased. The thing he set down was still there from the first time, and now he was setting it down again in the same place. And when he straightened the second time, there was still just one object on the gravel. My chest tightened. I looked away from the screen, just for a second, just to reset my eyes, because the flicker had left a bright smear across my vision, and I needed to blink it away. I looked at the counter to my right, the small Formica surface next to the console where I'd set my coffee thermos at the start of shift. The thermos wasn't there. My stomach dropped. That sick elevator lurch feeling, the kind you get when you miss a step in the dark. Nothing else looked disturbed. My backpack was still on the floor by the desk. The log notebook was still closed where I'd left it. The pens were in the same ceramic mug Courtney kept them in, all standing upright. But the thermos, black stainless steel, dented on one side from when I'd dropped it in my apartment last month, was gone. I turned back to the monitor. The object on the gravel in the west feed had resolved. Sharper now, even through the grain. Cylindrical, dark, dented on one side. It was my thermos. Richard was gone. The frame was empty except for the guy wires and the object on the ground and the edge of the tower's shadow cutting across the gravel. I stared at the screen. My hand was still on the edge of the console. I could feel the vibration through the metal, the same low hum that never stopped. But now it felt wrong, like it was coming from somewhere else, somewhere further down. The desk drawer vibrated. Not the console. The desk. The wooden one under the monitor, the single drawer on the right side that Courtney had opened once to show me the pager inside. She'd said it was for system alerts. Old protocol. No one used it anymore. but it was still registered to the site, and sometimes state emergency management sent test pages and I should just delete them and not reply. I hadn't touched the pager since she showed me. Hadn't even thought about it. I pulled the drawer open. The pager was rattling against the bottom of the drawer. Small black rectangle, scratched plastic, belt clip on the back. The kind they used in the 90s. The screen was lit up, bright green backlight, and I could see text scrolling. Offset. 60. It stopped vibrating when I picked it up. The screen stayed on. Just those 2 words and the number. No timestamp, no sender ID. The backlight made my fingers look yellow-green. I remembered what Courtney said. Delete them. Don't reply. There were 3 buttons on the pager, one labeled Del at the bottom. I pressed it. The screen blanked for half a second, then the text came back. Offset. 60. The pager beeped, just once. A single high-pitched tone, way too loud for the size of the speaker. It didn't sound like an alert. It sounded like a rejection. Like I'd tried to close a program that wouldn't close, tried to cancel a command the system wouldn't accept. I pressed Del again. Same thing. Blank. Text returns. Beep. I set the pager back in the drawer and slid it closed. My hand was shaking a little. The beep was still ringing in my ears. I looked at the carrier meter. It was sagging. Not dropping fast like before, just easing down, needle sliding left in little jumps. 97.4, 97.1, 96.8. I watched it drop and I didn't move. The backup oscillator was still engaged, green light still solid in the cabinet across the room, but the carrier was falling anyway, and the needle's motion had a rhythm to it, a pattern, like something was pulling it down in measured intervals, like something was taking. And that's when I understood. The rules weren't just rules. They were payments, Courtney's index card, the list. Don't adjust, don't prop, don't leave, answer on the second ring, log in the notebook only, check grounding first. They weren't safety protocols, they were transactions. You follow the rule, the station takes something small. You break the rule, it takes more. I'd answered the phone wrong, spoken first, expanded. So it took a minute. Took the sync between the speakers. Took the wall clock's second hand. And now it was still taking. I looked back at the monitor. The west feed. The thermos was still there on the gravel between the guy wires. Richard was still gone. The carrier meter read 96.3. I kept my hands on the desk and I didn't move, and I tried to figure out what I'd just paid for. I stood and walked to the break room. My hands were shaking. Not bad, but enough that I noticed when I reached for the coffee filters in the cabinet above the sink. The box was half empty, generic white basket filters from some bulk supplier. I pulled one out and set it in the machine. The clock on the break room wall read 1:52. Different clock than the one in the monitoring room. This one still moved. Second hand ticking forward like nothing was wrong. I watched it for a full rotation. 60 seconds. Normal. I filled the carafe at the sink and poured it into the reservoir. My reflection caught in the window over the counter. Just a shadow, really. The exterior floods didn't reach this side of the building. I looked away and focused on the coffee grounds. Courtney kept them in the freezer. Some brand I didn't recognize. Vacuum-sealed bricks in a box labeled with a government supplier code. I tore one open and the smell hit me, sharp and bitter. I dumped it into the filter without measuring. The machine gurgled when I hit the switch. I stood there and watched the drip start, slow at first, then steady. The sound filled the break room, that and the hum from the walls, which hadn't gone back to normal. Still strained, still wrong. I checked the clock again. 1:54. The pager had said, offset, 60, minus 60. 60 seconds. A minute. The carrier had been dropping since I hung up the first call. Since I had answered wrong, said too much, tried to explain. The station had taken the sync between the speakers, taken the wall clock, taken my thermos and put it outside between the guy wires where Richard had been walking. Richard, who I still hadn't seen come back. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the text thread with him. Last message was from 11:41 p.m. when he'd arrived. All clear outside. Checking fence. I typed, "You good?" Sent. The coffee was half done. I stared at the carafe and tried to think through what I was doing, what the station wanted. It had taken a minute. Now it wanted the minute back. Or it wanted something in exchange. The thermos outside wasn't random. It was mine, and it was placed exactly where Richard had been standing, between the guy wires in the west antenna field. The pager said offset, -60. I was supposed to give it something. The clock read 1:57. The coffee machine beeped. Full pot. I turned it off and grabbed the thermos from the counter, except it wasn't there. Right, the thermos was outside. I opened the cabinet next to the sink and found a white ceramic mug with a chipped handle. It would work. I filled it to the brim. Black, no sugar. Steam curled off the surface. 1:58. I carried the mug back through the hallway to the monitoring room. The double tick-tick was still going, left speaker on time, right speaker lagging. The carrier meter read 96.3, same as before. Steady now. Not dropping, but not climbing either. The wall clock still read 1:17, second hand frozen. My watch flickered when I glanced at it, 1:58, 1:17, 1:59. I set the mug on the desk and crossed to the exterior door. It was next to the transmitter hall entrance, a plain metal door with a push bar and a small rectangular window at eye level. Courtney had said not to leave the building during shift except for actual fire. I wasn't leaving. I checked the monitor. The west feed still showed my thermos on the gravel between the guy wires. The other 3 feeds were empty. No Richard. The clock read 1:59. I picked up the mug and walked to the door. The window showed nothing, just black. The exterior floods didn't reach this side either, and there was no moon tonight. I put my hand on the push bar and waited. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Richard. Yeah, just that. 1 word, no punctuation. I stared at it for 3 seconds, then put the phone away. The clock in the monitoring room hit 2. Iralt. I couldn't see it from here, but I knew. I felt it. The hum in the wall shifted, just slightly. A pull. I pushed the bar and cracked the door 6 inches. Cold air shoved through the gap, sharp and dry, January cold, the kind that stings your throat. I smelled dirt and distance and something else I couldn't name. I crouched and set the mug on the concrete step just outside the threshold, still holding the handle. For a second, nothing. Then I felt it. A tug. Faint, not on the mug exactly. More like something on the other side of the door had reached toward it, brushed the ceramic, tested the weight. The mug shifted a 1/4 inch toward the gap. I let go and slammed the door. The push bar clicked. The seal caught. I stepped back and my shoulders hit the wall. The hum eased. Not all the way back to normal, but close. Closer than it had been since 1:17. I turned and walked fast to the monitoring room, eyes on the carrier meter. It was climbing, 96.5, 96.8, 97.1. I sat in the chair and it squeaked under me. The needle kept moving, smooth now, no rhythm. Just rising. 97.4, 97.6, 97.9. It stopped at 98.1 and held. The doubled tick-tick kept going from the speakers, still out of sync, but the carrier was steady. The meters weren't sagging. The voltage readout was clean. The modulation needle sat centered. I exhaled and realized I'd been holding my breath. The station had wanted the coffee, or it had wanted me to put something outside at 2-act. Either way, I'd done it. I'd figured out the demand and I'd paid it, and the system had steadied. For the first time since 1:17, the meters were holding. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. Then the red phone rang. My eyes snapped open. The small bulb inside the casing was glowing again, pale and sickly. The ringer was loud, mechanical, The same rotary clatter as before. 1 ring. I reached for the handset. 2 rings. I picked it up and brought it to my ear. I didn't say anything. Silence on the line. Not dead silence. There was a faint hiss, the kind you get on old long-distance calls. Or maybe it was just the hum from the walls bleeding through. Then the voice. "Good evening." Same voice as before, calm, polite, older, measured cadence, every word placed carefully. An administrator's voice, the kind of voice that talks about compliance and records and doesn't expect to be interrupted. I kept my mouth shut. "I'm calling to confirm whether the offset was accepted." I didn't answer, didn't move, barely breathed. The voice waited. 2 seconds. 3. Then it continued, smooth, like my silence was expected. "I understand. Let me clarify. At 1:17 this morning, the system experienced a differential event. 1 minute was removed from the operational sequence. Standard procedure requires an offset to restore equilibrium. The offset value is minus 60 seconds. If accepted, the station will reflect this adjustment in its next transmission cycle." I stared at the carrier meter. Still 98.1. Still steady. The voice kept going. "You may be wondering about the practical implications. Let me provide an example. There's a ferry that departs from Anacortes, Washington, every morning at 6:10 a.m. It services the San Juan Islands. The ferry relies on WWV for its scheduling system. If the offset is not accepted, the ferry will attempt to depart at 6:09 instead. 1 minute early. The dock crew won't be ready. The passengers won't be loaded. The captain will override the system manually, but the delay will cascade. The 7:15 departure will leave at 7:14. The 8:30 will leave at 8:29. By noon, the entire schedule will be off by 1 minute, and no one will know why." The details landed in my head clean and whole. I could see the ferry, white hull, blue stripe, rows of cars on the lower deck. I could see the dock crew in orange vests, the passengers waiting in the terminal with coffee and duffel bags. I could see the captain in the wheelhouse, staring at the clock, confused. I'd never been to Washington, never seen the San Juan Islands, didn't know if the ferry he was describing even existed. But I could see it. The voice. Mason Luna. That's who this was, I knew it now. Kept talking. "The offset is a courtesy. The station requires it, but you're not obligated to accept on behalf of external systems. That's not your role. Your role is to monitor and log, to maintain the signal. The rest is clerical." The hum in the walls shifted again, lower, pulling. Then the minute tone played, not from the phone, from the monitor speakers. The long, low beep that marked the top of each minute. The one that played every 60 seconds on the signal. Except it was 2:03. The tone shouldn't play until 2:04. I looked at the console timecode display, the little digital readout above the mixing board that showed UTC in green LED digits. It read 02:03:58, 02:03:59, 02:03 d'aujourd'hui. The numbers rolled backward. The seconds counted down instead of up, flickered, then jumped. 02:02:47. The carrier meter twitched. The needle swung left, just a hair, then back. I kept the phone to my ear and didn't say a word. Mason Luna's voice stayed calm. "The offset has been logged. Thank you for your cooperation." The line went dead. I sat there with the handset against my ear, listening to nothing. The hum from the walls settled into a new pattern. Not strained anymore. Not normal either, something else. The time code kept rolling backward. 2:02:31, 02:02:18. The station wasn't drifting. It was being pulled into a different accounting. I figured maybe if I killed the tick audio, just the ticks, kept the carrier on but stopped the actual broadcast sound, maybe that would close whatever door I'd opened. Silence might shut it. The station could keep transmitting, but nothing would go out that people could hear. Worth trying. There was a switch on the console Courtney had shown me on day 3, labeled Mod Cut. She'd said it was for maintenance only. Don't touch it during normal operation. This wasn't normal operation anymore. I reached for it. The carrier meter was still at 98.1, steady. The doubled tick-tick kept going from both speakers. My hand was shaking a little, but I flipped the switch down. The tick stopped. Just gone. The room went quiet except for the hum in the walls and the faint buzz from the fluorescent lights in the hall. The carrier meter didn't move. Still 98.1. The signal was still going out. Just silent now. No ticks, no voice announcement coming up at the top of the hour. Nothing. I exhaled. The red phone started ringing. Not the normal 2-ring pattern. Rapid bursts. Ring, 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 ring. No pause between them, just this frantic mechanical clatter like something was trying to force its way through the line. The sound filled the whole room. I looked at the monitor. All 4 camera feeds went black. Not static, not blue screen. Just black, like someone had put tape over every lens at the same time. North lot, south fence, east approach, west antenna field, all gone. I flipped the switch back up. The ticks returned immediately. Tick, 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 tick. Same doubled pattern from before. Left speaker on time, right speaker 1/10 of a second behind. The red phone stopped mid-ring. The camera feeds blinked back on. North lot showed the empty gravel. South fence showed the chain link and the field beyond. East approach showed the access road. West feed showed the antenna field, the guy wires, the thermos still sitting on the gravel between the anchors. I sat back. The chair squeaked. My chest was tight, and I realized I'd been holding my breath since the feeds went black. I looked at the exterior door next to the transmitter hall entrance, the one I'd opened at 2 a.m. to set the coffee mug outside. There was frost on the inside of the glass. Thin lace patterns, delicate and white, spreading across the small square window in the door. It hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. I was sure. I'd looked at that door after the feeds came back, and the glass had been clear. I stood and walked over. The frost was only on the interior side, not the exterior. It was cold in the building. Courtney kept the heat low, said the equipment ran hot enough, but not cold enough for frost, not even close. I didn't touch the glass. The hum in the walls felt different now. Not strained, not normal. Something else. Like the building was paying attention. I went back to the desk and opened the bottom cabinet under the console, the one Courtney had unlocked on day 4 to show me where the backup logbooks were stored. 3 black notebooks identical to the one on the desk, all filled with years of carrier readings and shift notes in different handwriting. I pulled them out and set them on the floor. Behind them was a binder, dark blue, 3-ring, with a white label on the spine written in faded black marker, Incidents. Courtney hadn't mentioned this one. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. The cover was scuffed and the rings were rusted at the edges. I opened it. The first page was a log entry dated April 7th, 2006. Typed on an old typewriter, the letters uneven and some of the keys hitting harder than others. It read like a technical report. Incident summary. Contractor Don Lee exited facility at 03:22 during carrier deviation event. 96.1% duration 4 minutes. Subject stated intention to smoke. Subject did not return by end of shift, 06:00. Vehicle located in North Lot. Subject recovered May 2nd by Larimer County Sheriff from Horsetooth Reservoir, Northeast Shore. Cause of death, drowning. Facility badge still clipped to subject's jacket. No explanation for travel from site to reservoir, approx 18 miles. Conclusion. Thermos left empty. Offset claimed. I read it twice. Don Lee. The name didn't mean anything to me. I'd never met him. But Courtney had mentioned contractors a few times during training, always in past tense, always without detail. The conclusion didn't match the rest of the report. Thermos left empty. Offset claimed. It didn't connect to anything in the summary. It was just there. Blunt. Like whoever wrote it knew what it meant and didn't need to explain. I flipped to the next entry. November 14th, 2009. Same typewriter style, different hands on the keys. Incident summary. Primary oscillator failure at 2241. Backup oscillator engaged manually at 2243. Carrier restored to 97.8%. 8-second dropout recorded. External report filed by Teresa Martinez, RN, Poudre Valley Hospital. Infusion pump monitoring time-dependent medication displayed error at 2242. Advanced dosage interval by 1 minute. Patient outcome, stable after manual correction. 3 additional clocks in Fort Collins metro area reported deviation -1 minute over following 72 hours. Self-corrected. Conclusion. Thermos left empty. Offset claimed. I stared at the page. Teresa Martinez, a nurse, monitoring a medication pump. The station had dropped carrier for 8 seconds, and a hospital clock had jumped a minute, and someone's medication had almost gone out wrong. And the conclusion was the same, word for word. I kept flipping. 6 more entries, different years, different incidents, an operator's wristwatch that ran backward for an hour, a security guard who heard his own voice on the monitor speaker announcing a time he hadn't reached yet, a maintenance tech who opened the archive room and found frost on the binders in July. Every single one ended the same way. Conclusion. Thermos left empty. Offset claimed. I closed the binder and set it down. My thermos was outside, on the gravel, between the guy wires. I'd made coffee in the break room and put it in a mug because my thermos was gone, and then I'd set the mug outside, and the station had taken it, and the carrier had climbed back up. Thermos left empty. I looked at the monitor. The west feed showed the antenna field. Richard's truck was visible now at the edge of the frame, parked on the access road facing the towers. I could see his silhouette in the driver's seat through the windshield. I zoomed the camera in using the dial under the monitor. Richard was sitting completely still, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead at the antenna field. The thermos was still on the gravel between the guy wires. I zoomed in closer. The thermos cap was off, lying on the gravel next to the body of the thermos, and the thermos was tipped on its side, empty. I pulled my phone out of my backpack and texted Richard, "You need to leave." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, but he didn't move. His truck stayed where it was. His silhouette didn't shift. I typed again. Now, no reply, no dots, nothing. Richard stayed in the truck. The extra tick came back, louder this time, not a tenth of a second behind, half a second. Tick, pause, tick, tick. The right speaker was falling further out of sync and the delay was growing. The carrier meter dipped, just a little, 98.1 to 97.9. The red phone started ringing. The minute tone hadn't even finished yet. I could still hear the long beep from the monitor speakers, the one that marked the top of the hour, and underneath it the phone was already ringing. Second ring coming. I stared at the handset. The carrier dropped to 97.6. I stopped looking for a way to fix it. That was the thing. I'd been trying to reverse something or undo it or make it go back to normal, but the station didn't work that way. It took. It pulled. It required things. And the only leverage I had was Rule 1. Don't adjust the primary oscillator and the carrier meter itself. If the carrier dropped, something broke. Not just here. Somewhere else. Ferry schedules, hospital equipment, clocks in houses I'd never seen, so I wasn't going to let it drop. That was the bargain I could control. Keep the carrier steady. Give the station what it needed to stay stable. Don't let the needle fall below 97%. I could do that. I looked at the west camera feed one more time. Richard's truck was still there, his silhouette motionless in the driver's seat, the thermos tipped on its side between the guy wires with the cap off. Empty. I stood up. Chair squeaked. My legs felt shaky, but I made it to the break room without leaning on the wall. The coffee machine was still half full from the last pot. I poured the rest into the sink, rinsed the carafe, and started over. New filter. New grounds from the freezer. I measured this time. 3 scoops, filled the reservoir to the 8-cup line, and hit the button. While it brewed, I went back to the monitoring room and grabbed my thermos from where I'd left it on the... No, wrong. The thermos was outside. I blinked and rubbed my eyes. The image of the thermos sitting on my desk had been so clear I'd almost reached for it. I checked the carrier meter. Still 97.6, holding but not climbing. The coffee finished at 02:11. I filled the thermos all the way to the top, sealed it, and carried it back to the monitoring room. I set it on the floor next to the interior door. Not outside, just near it, like proximity mattered. Maybe it did. I sat back down and watched the carrier meter. 97.6. The needle twitched but didn't move left or right. The double tick-tick kept going from the speakers, the right one still half a second behind. The wall clock was still frozen at 1:17. My watch flickered between 02:13 and 01:17 and 02:14. I opened the log notebook to a blank page halfway through and left it there, pen resting in the center crease. Then I just waited. I watched the clock on the console timecode display count forward. It had stopped rolling backward around 02 and 07 and had been moving normally since then, or what looked like normally. 02:15. 02:16. The doubled tick kept its rhythm. My hands were shaking, so I pressed them flat on the desk. At 02:18, the red phone rang. I picked up after the second ring. Didn't say anything. "Good evening," Mason Luna said. Same calm voice, same controlled cadence. "I'm calling to complete the record for tonight's offset event." I stayed quiet. "For documentation purposes," he continued, "I'll need to confirm the operator's full name and employee identification number." I didn't answer. A pause. 2 seconds, maybe 3. "The record requires a name," Mason said. Still polite, still even. "It's a formality, but it does need to be logged." I looked at the carrier meter. Still 97.6. "I understand you may have concerns," Mason continued, "but the offset has already been accepted. The adjustment is complete. This is simply an administrative step to close the file." I pulled the notebook closer and flipped it to the blank page I'd marked earlier. I picked up the pen. "Your name won't be used for anything beyond internal documentation," Mason said. "It's standard protocol. Every operator who processes an offset is recorded. Courtney Strickland has her entries. Don Lee had his. This is no different." I wrote in large block letters across the top of the page. "Offset accepted." Then I held the page up toward the corner of the room where the small interior camera was mounted above the cabinet. Courtney had pointed it out on day 3, said it recorded console activity for maintenance review. I held the notebook steady so the lens could see it. "I can wait," Mason said. I didn't lower the notebook, just kept it there. The extra tick hit loud, louder than it had been all night, and I flinched. The right speaker's tick slammed into the left speaker's tick, and for half a second they overlapped in a sharp doubled crack that made my teeth ache. Then it stopped. The ticks settled. Left speaker, right speaker, perfectly synced. One tick, clean, normal. I lowered the notebook and looked at the carrier meter. 98.1, steady, no drift. The needle sat there without twitching. I checked the other meters. Voltage normal. Modulation centered. The backup oscillator's green light was still solid in the cabinet, but the primary had clearly taken over again because the hum in the walls had eased all the way back to baseline. On the monitor, the west camera feed showed Richard's truck. The headlights flashed once, bright, then dark. The truck didn't move. Richard's shape was still in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. "Thank you," Mason said. His voice had shifted, not warmer, but final. "The record is complete." The line went dead, clean cut, no static. I hung up the handset and turned toward the interior door. The frost on the glass was melting. Thin trails of water ran down the inside surface and pooled on the tile at the base of the door frame. I didn't go outside. I sat back down, checked the carrier meter again, still 98.1, and opened the log notebook to the current page. I wrote the time as 02:18 and then offset event resolved, carrier restored to 98.1%, tick sync corrected, primary oscillator stable. I didn't write about Mason asking for my name. Didn't write about holding up the notebook to the camera. Didn't write about the thermos outside or the thermos on the floor next to the door. I logged every meter, reading at 15-minute intervals after that. ZO230, O245, ZO3 diode, carrier steady at 98.1 or 98.2. No drift. No ticks doubling. The wall clock stayed frozen at 1:17, but the console time code kept moving forward, and my watch stopped flickering around 03:14. I kept the thermos on the floor near the door. Didn't touch it. Didn't move it. At 6:47, I heard a vehicle outside. I toggled the exterior camera feed and saw Courtney's sedan pulling into the north lot. She parked in her usual spot, got out holding a travel mug, and walked toward the entrance. She didn't look at the west antenna field, didn't glance at the guy wires. I heard the keypad beep in the front hall, and then her footsteps in the corridor. She came into the monitoring room at 06:52, holding the mug in one hand and her jacket folded over her other arm. She looked at me, then at the console, then at the wall clock still frozen at 1:17. "Morning," she said. "Morning." She set her mug on the far edge of the desk and draped her jacket over the back of the chair. Then she held out her hand for the log notebook. I handed it to her. She flipped to the last entry and read backward through the night. Her face didn't change. She turned another page. Another. She paused at 02:18 where I'd written about the offset event, then kept going back to 01:17 where I'd logged the extra tick and the carrier dip. She closed the notebook and set it on the desk. "You used the backup oscillator," she said. "Yeah, manual override." She nodded, looked at the tall gray cabinet. The green light was still solid. "You can switch it back now," she said. "Primary's stable." I stood up and crossed to the cabinet, flipped the red switch back to auto. The green light blinked once, twice, then resumed its normal, slow pulse. When I turned around, Courtney was looking at the thermos on the floor next to the interior door. She didn't ask about it, just looked at it for 3 seconds, then looked back at me. "You made it through," she said. "Carrier didn't drop." "No." "You paid what the station needed." I didn't know if that was a question, so I didn't answer. She picked up her mug and took a sip, still watching me. "The offset gets logged. You did that right." I nodded. She turned to the console and pressed a few buttons I didn't recognize, checking something in a menu I hadn't seen before. Her movements were controlled, calm, but deliberate in a way that felt like preparation. "It'll come back," she said quietly, still looking at the screen. "Not tonight. Maybe not next week. But it will." I believed her. She finished whatever she was checking and the screen returned to the normal meter display. She looked at the wall clock, still frozen, and reached up to pull the battery out of the back. The second hand dropped and hung loose. "I'll get maintenance to replace this," she said. On the monitor, the west camera feed showed Richard's truck starting to move. Headlights off, just rolling forward on the access road toward the main gate. I watched it until it cleared the frame. Courtney saw me looking and glanced at the monitor. "Richard's fine," she said. "He always is." I wasn't sure what that meant, but I didn't ask. She picked up the log notebook again and opened it to the page where I'd written "offset accepted" in block letters. She ran her thumb over the words, then closed the notebook and handed it back to me. "Your shift's over at 7, she said. "You can go." I looked at the console, at the carrier meter holding steady at 98.2, at the speakers playing the normal tick, at the laminated card Courtney had given me on the first night, still sitting next to the keyboard where I'd left it. I picked up the card and peeled a strip of clear tape from the dispenser on the desk. I pressed the card flat against the edge of the console where it couldn't slide off or get covered by paperwork. Courtney watched me do it, but didn't say anything. I grabbed my backpack from the floor and slung it over one shoulder, looked at the thermos still sitting next to the interior door. I left it there. Courtney sat down in the chair and pulled the log notebook toward her. She clicked a pen and started writing something in small, precise handwriting. I walked out of the monitoring room, down the hallway past the buzzing fluorescent lights, and out the front door into the cold morning air. The sun was just starting to come up over the field to the east. My car was the only one in the north lot besides Courtney's sedan. I got in, started the engine, and sat there for a minute with my hands on the wheel while the heater warmed up. Then I drove home.